Today's story is about an entitled neighbor who thought he could take over my backyard. He lied, he manipulated the HOA, and he pushed me to the edge. But what he didn't know was that I was ready to fight back, and the revenge I got was so satisfying that the entire neighborhood still talks about it. So sit back, relax, and let me take you through the story of how one arrogant neighbor lost everything when he messed with the wrong person. When my wife and I bought our first home, we thought we had struck gold. It wasn't a mansion, but it was ours, a cozy 3-bedroom house with a gorgeous backyard that had a sturdy fence, a small patio, and just enough room for summer barbecues and maybe even a future swing set for our kids. We moved in full of excitement, ready to start fresh in this quiet neighborhood. At first, things seemed perfect. The streets were clean, the lawns were well kept, and the neighbors waved when we drove by. That's when we met Gary. Gary lived in the house directly behind ours. On our second week in the neighborhood, he came over with what seemed like a friendly smile. He introduced himself, told us he'd lived here for nearly 20 years, and that he basically knew everyone and everything about the HOA. At first, I thought he was just being welcoming. But within a few minutes, the friendliness started to wear thin. Gary leaned over the fence, pointed toward the back corner of my yard, and said, "Oh, by the way, that section right there. That's actually mine. The last family who lived here agreed to let me use it, so you won't mind if I keep my stuff there, right?" I froze for a second. His tone wasn't exactly asking permission, it was more like telling me how it was going to be. I politely told him, "Actually, we had a survey done during closing, and the fence line is accurate. That corner is definitely on my property." Gary smirked. "Well, that's not how we've always done it. But I guess you'll figure that out." Then he just walked away. At the time, I shrugged it off. Maybe he was confused. Maybe he really believed he had some kind of agreement. But oh, I was so wrong. Because within weeks, Gary began acting like my backyard was his. First, it was small things. A lawn chair leaning against my fence. Then a garden hose coiled up on my side. The real kicker came when we hosted a barbecue, and I overheard Gary telling one of his friends, "Yeah, that part of the yard is actually mine, but I let them use it for now." I felt my blood boil. Things quickly got worse. One morning, I looked out the window and nearly dropped my coffee. Gary had set up a small shed, right up against my fence, and at least 3 feet into my side of the property line. I marched outside and said, "Gary, what the hell is this? That's on my property." Gary crossed his arms and said smugly, "Nope. HOA approved it. It's fine." That was my first real taste of how deep this problem went. Because not 2 days later, I got a violation notice from the HOA. Apparently my backyard fence was unkempt and in violation of community standards. Which was absolute nonsense. My fence was in perfect condition. The only thing wrong with it was that Gary had shoved his shed up against it. I tried appealing. But the HOA president? Oh, guess who it was? Yep, Gary's golfing buddy. At this point, I realized I wasn't just dealing with one entitled neighbor. I was up against an entitled neighbor with friends and power. Gary became bolder. His kids started running into my backyard to play, as if it was their own. He started moving his grill closer to my fence, sometimes even opening my gate without asking. Every time I complained, the HOA sent me another violation letter. It was insane. I was being fined for everything from improper lawn edging to unsightly trash bins, while Gary got away with literal trespassing. I felt trapped. My dream home was turning into a nightmare. But if Gary thought I was going to roll over, he was dead wrong. I started doing research. Lots of it. First, I dug out the property survey that had been done during closing. Sure enough, the line was clear. That shed was 3 feet inside my property. Then I looked up state property laws. And I found something interesting. If a neighbor tries to claim land by continuous use, the homeowner can file an official encroachment complaint to protect their rights. I knew right then what I had to do. But I didn't stop there. I started documenting everything. Every time Gary's kids ran into my yard, I took a video. Every time Gary left something leaning against my fence, snap a picture. Every violation letter the HOA sent me, I filed it away. And just when I thought I couldn't hate Gary more, my neighbor Linda filled me in on the rest. Linda had lived down the street for 10 years. She pulled me aside one day and said, "You know, you're not the first. Gary did this to the last family who lived in your house too. They moved out after 2 years because they were sick of fighting him. He thinks if he pushes hard enough, he can scare people into giving him what he wants." That was the moment I knew I wasn't going to be another one of Gary's victims. The plan was simple but devastating. Step 1. Gather undeniable evidence. Done. Step 2. File an official encroachment notice with the county. I sent them the survey, the photos, and the videos. They confirmed the shed was illegal. Step 3. Notify the HOA in writing, certified mail, that Gary's shed was on my property and had to be removed immediately. The HOA ignored me. Of course they did. That was exactly what I wanted. Because step 4? File a lawsuit for property encroachment and HOA negligence. 2 weeks later, Gary was served by the sheriff. I wish I had filmed his reaction. He came storming over to my house, waving the papers in the air, screaming, "You're going to regret this! You can't win against me!" I just smiled and shut the door in his face. Court day finally came. I showed up in a suit with my neatly organized binder of evidence. Gary swaggered and looking like he owned the place, but his confidence started to crack as soon as the judge began asking questions. I presented the official survey, the photos, the violation letters, and the certified letter I'd sent to the HOA. I even had video of Gary saying, "That's actually my yard now. They just don't know it yet." The judge's face said it all. Gary's excuses were pathetic. He claimed there was a gentleman's agreement with the previous owners. The judge cut him off. "Even if that were true, it has no legal standing." The HOA president tried to defend him, saying the shed was approved. The judge asked to see documentation. Of course, there was none. When the verdict finally came, it was everything I had hoped for and more. The judge ordered Gary to remove his shed immediately, at his own expense. He was also required to pay all of my legal fees. The HOA was fined for negligence and forced to revoke every single violation they had issued me. Gary's face turned beet red. The HOA president looked like he wanted to sink through the floor. It was glorious. The best part? Watching Gary tear down his shed in front of the whole neighborhood. For someone who loved attention, this was the wrong kind. People stood on their lawns and watched as he dragged pieces of lumber back into his yard, muttering under his breath. The HOA president? He didn't last long after that. Word spread about how he had been covering for Gary, and within a year, he was voted out. A new, much fairer board took over, and the neighborhood actually became the peaceful place I had dreamed of when we first moved in. As for Gary, well, let's just say he doesn't bother me anymore. He stays on his side of the fence now, barely even making eye contact when we pass. And every time I sit in my backyard, I look at that corner of my property and smile. Because Gary thought he could steal it from me. But in the end, he lost his shed, his money, and his reputation, and I got my sweet revenge.